What's up out there? You know the game is good when you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, you get up and you just have to crank a video out because something's on your mind. So I watched Connor Converse's video talking to, I think he had 3 things he didn't like about the campaign or something like that. The first one was, I don't remember number 3, but the first one was that the bosses were too easy and that the trash mobs were too hard. And he was playing Warrior. I started Warrior the other day and I bounced off of it. I didn't like it all that much. And I rolled into a witch that stalled out a little bit later in the bossing area. Actually, I stalled out right here against these 2 bosses right here. I stalled out against those 2. With my sorceress, I came in and just blew all of them up with lightning damage. Had a great time. But after watching Connor's video yesterday, I was like, what makes the warrior so different that it can just stand up to all the bosses? And he was saying that the trash mobs were really hard, or that, something like that. And I was like, man, my experience of trash mobs were just easy to kill off. With the sorceress, I'm running Spark, Flame Wall, and Orb of Storms or whatever. So you set all that up. I'm not having any issues at all. And I'm not having any issues. Well, now I'm not having any issues with Warrior today looking at this, but I wanted to revisit my Warrior and see what I was missing, because I was like, I'm struggling left and right against bosses and things, and with the Warrior and stuff like that, I was really struggling. So I was like, all right, I got to see what he's talking about, because I know with Path of Exile, why can I not target this one guy? Get off my back. With Path of Exile, your build matters greatly. And one of the things that I did in PoE 1, the current league that we have, is ran through a lot of the different ascendancies, almost all the different ascendancies, to try to make builds out of them and just basically prepare for this game. And one of the things that I noticed as I went through the campaign, or each time I went through the campaign, was if the build was off, you died a lot. So if you didn't have enough, if you weren't killing the enemies fast enough, or if your defensive layers sucked, you either didn't do enough damage, and you'd come up against a rare and it would be really hard to kill that rare. It's because your build sucked, or the build that I had was garbage at that moment. But if you had a really good build, you could just cut through everything. And I'd have a lot of people commenting that, I didn't have enough life, or I didn't have enough defensive layers or something like that. If my DPS was good and I was mowing everything down, I didn't notice until I got to mapping. And it was quite easy. Some of the bosses would get difficult towards the end of the campaign in PoE 1, but the general takeaway that I had from running the campaign so many different times was that your build matters greatly. And it may sound obvious, but I think a lot of other games, it's easier to have bad builds do well. In Path of Exile, if you have a bad build, you're going to have a bad day, and it's not going to be pleasant. You will die a lot. And I think back to the first time that I played Path of Exile, I played a witch there, and the original PoE, and I died a tremendous amount of times. I found out you could just die at the bosses and keep starting over, and I took advantage of that. But I also died a lot, like a lot, 100 times or something like that. It was some ridiculous amount of times of dying. So what I'm driving at here is, if you get the right skill combination and attributes and everything, if you get everything put together well, you will have a very good time playing Path of Exile. So the combination of stuff I found with the sorceress was the right combination of things to have a good time. The combination of stuff that I was doing with my warrior initially was the combination to have a bad time. So in the following up with what Connor was talking about in his video, I struggled through the Miller with this build, with this class, the very first time I fought, which is out here. And then I was struggling through, what do we do? Clearfell, I guess we were going through in the Mud Burrow. I was struggling in this area. After I watched Connor's video, I came back and revisited things. And I am currently running Rolling Slam. I'm trying to use Infernal Cry, but you cry out one time, and I don't know, I haven't found total use for it. Rolling Slam by itself seems to work fairly well. Adding Shockwave Totem does a little better, but you can see I'm having mana issues. But at any rate, after I watched his video yesterday, Day one, I'm struggling with Clearfell and Mudburrow. I watched this video yesterday, and I tried around with Bone Shatter again. Bone Shatter, I didn't like it at all. It might get better as it goes on, but you like walk up and hit something in the jaw, and then you got to hit the next monster in the jaw, and it's not that good for clearing packs. Earthquake was good, but you had to drop Earthquake and then kind of move and keep dropping it and running because you had to wait for that AoE to kick off. It didn't really jive as much. This rolling slam, as you can see, it's doing a lot of damage. The weapon that I've got I've built it up fairly decently, so you've got a lot of stun build up, 20% increased fizz damage on this rune that I've got plugged into it, and we've got some +2 to all level of melee skills, which is basically everything I've got, I think. So the weapon is kind of carrying me in a decent way, but realistically, I think Rolling Slam is a pretty good skill. It's a slow skill, but once you kind of get used to it, it's not too bad. So I've moved all the way over to here in like an hour or so last night. I mowed down these two bosses here like nothing. Now I died to this guy, the Praetor or whatever, whoever this guy was. I died to him because he summons in this chick and she drops all that stuff on the ground, but I did what, instead of trying to dodge everything and stay away and try to get in and, do damage that way, I did what Connor said, just go in and face tank it. And you just roll for the win with this thing, this rolling slam. You just keep rolling on them. Eventually, with the stun buildup or whatever, which is why I was kind of glad to get this node here, this increased melee damage and increased damage against heavily stunned enemies. So once their stun breaks or whatever, that buildup goes on, you're just going to do a lot of damage to them. So once I just stood there and rolled in place and just started mowing through stuff, I was laughing at how easy some of these bosses were. Like, they were totally trivial. So I understand where he's coming from. If you break their stun and all that, you just mow them down. This thing here, this one here, the only reason I died to him the first time is because she came in and dropped all the stuff on the ground. He was trivial. When I fought her, she was trivial. Just when that AoE comes out, you just had to get out of the way. Like, you can't, with the build that I haven't been totally able to just stand there and beat on him face to face, but they were far easier. I still had to get away from some of their mechanics, but like when I was fighting the Miller early on, when I first built my warrior, I was trying to get away all the time, and I was trying to, if I had just stayed there and beat on him, number one, if I had the skills slotted in correctly, because I think I was doing Maze Strike or something like that. Like, I totally didn't have it all set. It was total learning curve, total noob moment. But now it's dialed in. Lachlan, or whatever the guy was over here that you fight after these two, I died to him the first time, I think, because I wasn't dodging anything. All right, I'll just walk in and face tank him. I had to dodge things a little bit. But when you break his stun or whatever, and you just start piling on the damage, I had him down super quick. And then whatever I fought in the hunting grounds, when I got into the hunting grounds, I started seeing what Connor was complaining about in part 2, which is that trash mobs are hard. It's because of melee and the close proximity to it. I was getting a lot of degens from like poison and stuff like that. With my sorceress, or probably any ranged character, you just stand off from them and shoot them and do as much damage as you want. So I think he's getting into the portion of the build that he needs to probably correct that. And he's far better at the game than I am. So I don't know. I don't know if he's tried any other character classes or not, but for me, sorceress smoothed all that over, and you just walk out of the degen and go away. With this class here, you're going to be in the degen because you're meleeing everything right in its face. But I don't know. My take on Warrior Day 1 was that it was total garbage. After watching his video and coming back and trying it and just face tanking stuff, I have a drastically different opinion of it. I think it's much better than I initially thought. So if you bounced off Warrior, you may give it a shot and just try to stay in the battle instead of running away. Now, it may get brutal as things go on. I think I saw somebody else was playing Warrior and they bounced off of it and rolled something different. So Warrior may not be a good experience for a while. We may have some kinks to work out with it for like defensive layers and stuff. But my take on day one and my take on day three are totally different. And I think Warrior is really good. You can totally destroy bosses with it. So I have two theories of what Grinding Gear Games is going for. Because like I look over here and it's 80% increased armor from equipped body armor. That seems like a really high number that's going to get nerfed. Like I would imagine some of this stuff's going to get nerfed. I think either one of two things, I'm not going to say is likely, but I think there's probably one of two things that seems reasonably likely to have happened. Either they expected a lot of new players to come in, so they made the passive tree fairly easy going first, so that people could just pick points that do a lot of damage and things like that. Or the end game content is that much harder and they needed to account for it early on. I'm not sure. I haven't decided yet. Maybe it's a feel thing because they know the game is fairly slow or whatever, and they're just kind of accounting for certain things. I think a lot of this stuff's going to work itself out. I know they've already talked about nerfing certain things, but Melee is not in the bad place that I thought it was, and the game greatly, it's just like PoE 1. The game greatly depends on the build that you're using and the way you've got it put together. If you put it together poorly or use a skill that you don't get all the right things on, there are bad skills. There in PoE 1, there's definitely bad skills. There's meta skills, there's non-meta skills, and then there's just straight up bad skills that don't really go anywhere. And I bet there's a lot of things like that in here. It's just you got to tinker around with it and try to find the right combination of things. We don't know a meta yet. We have not gotten that far. And I think the experience that each one of us is getting largely depends on the build. If you bounced off the game, maybe you started with a class that you need to work on. I would have told you that Warriors sucked. In fact, I did tell you Warriors sucked. It's not one that I would necessarily recommend. I think you're going to have to be a more, I don't want to say more advanced player, but I think you're going to have to play this in a completely different style than anything else. And I was trying to play it in more of a dodgy style. Like for me personally, I was trying to dodge stuff too much where I should have just ran face first. I had other problems going on, but I should have just ran in face first and killed him. In fact, I probably should just go start a character and try to fight the Miller again just to see how that goes, because I totally didn't have it set up. I think Rolling Slam's what you start with, and I wasn't using that. I was using like Maze Strike or something, so I was set up for failure right off the bat, but it was all brand new. I had just gotten in after, waiting for the game for a few hours, and live and learn. So at any rate, you may just try a second character, try an alt and see how Warrior goes, or revisit the Warrior you've got. You may find problems with the trash mobs, like all the stuff on the ground that they drop, the degen and everything. But I revisited Warrior and I have been just absolutely decimating the content. And now that I've got like this shockwave totem and stuff, it's just even that much more. So anyway, that's going to do it for this video. We will catch you on the next one. Take care.